All right, guys, welcome back to Reconstructing Christianity. Kendrick, it's been a while. What have you been up to in our short hiatus?
Well, I've been reading a certain book.
Yeah,
Um, I've been watching the Twitter drama unfold. Um, and I've just been having a nice time with this time of chaos.
it really has been chaos. But before we get into it, if you're wondering why Kendrick's making a funny expression, it's because we're watching Home Alone 3 in the background.
Yeah,
The best Home Alone, in my perfect opinion.
you're a pagan savage.
But anyways, just to get some housekeeping out of the way, obviously you're watching us, so we've made some upgrades to the podcast, and they can see when you whisper to me now, Kendrick.
Crap.
So.
It's so.
Anyways, yeah, so we're recording now, and we're videotaping it as well, so you can watch us instead of just listening to us.
Mhm.
You're welcome. You can see our beautiful faces now.
Ladies, well, I'm not.
Kendrick single.
Well,
Reach out. Okay. um, yeah, we've been on hiatus. We're prepping for season 2. Again, we're going over pacifism and just war theory. We're doing a little bit of homework on this one because just war theory kind of started with Augustine and his City of God book. So we are going to have to work through that.
yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of y'all have read Augustine, but it's not exactly light reading. So,
Hmm.
but anyways, in the meantime, we're going to start the main season back up in January, February. Right now, we're just recording this book club, going over the case for Christian nationalism.
Hmm.
And next month, we're going to have a Christmas episode
Yay!
to hold y'all over in the meantime.
To tide over the tens and tens of fans.
Yes, all 10 of you.
Hmm.
When is that joke going to get old, do you think?
It hasn't gone old yet, so
There we
we're
go.
fine.
Okay. Well, yeah, so let's get into it. I've cracked open this Shiner Holiday Brew to get me through this episode because this book has been it's been a giant source of controversy on Twitter in the Christian Reformed world.
Yeah, if you're reformed, you hate it. If you're G3, you really hate it. Um, and if you're somewhere in the middle, then you kind of like it.
Yeah, yeah, I generally like the book. I don't agree with everything.
Hmm.
But let's kind of go over the drama a little bit for people not on Twitter. God bless y'all if you're not on Twitter. Don't ever do it. Just stay off.
Hmm.
But for people maybe who don't follow Reformed Twitter very much,
Hmm.
oh my, it has been absolutely insane.
Oh, insane is an understatement.
There has been just a chasm dividing two groups at this point, and there is absolutely no middle ground.
Hmm.
It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I think my biggest fear is after the controversy, whenever the whenever the cord snaps and we all just fall head over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's discuss the two main groups in this debate.
Hmm.
So the first one, obviously, is Stephen Wolfe and the Christian Nationalist group. I would kind of throw Doug Wilson, Andrew Torba,
Andrew Isker.
Andrew Isker, in his book The Boniface Option,
Hmm.
and just a whole host of names. William Wolfe.
Chocolate Knox.
Yeah, a lot of names on this side, and on the other side, we have what basically has at this point has just been called the G3 camp. Although not everyone in this camp is part of G3. It's mostly G3 and associates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for people that don't know what G3 is, what is G3, Kenny?
Well, it's the ministries that's really turned into a denomination, and it's headed by Josh Bice, and and well, headed is kind of the wrong word, uh, because it's really headed by Michael Fallon.
Oh no.
But anyways,
Oh boy, here we go. He's already getting into it, guys.
so you know what we have here is sort of the G3 group, which is not even the front runners of the G3 group, because I think the front runners are Paul Washer, Vodi Balcom, Stephen Lawson.
Or even John MacArthur. I mean, I think he's the biggest name people know that's associated with G3. I don't think he's part of it, but he's a big associate with them.
Oh yeah. Um, well, then I guess only one front runner is sort of not Christian nationalist. Um, but uh, then we have the chicklets of the G3 group, which is Owen Strahan or whatever his name is.
Strahan, I think.
Strahan, whatever. Uh, then we got Scott Aniel, Jeff Johnson, Tom Buck, Gabe Hughes from When We Understand the Text,
Mm-hmm.
um, and to a fair point, James White, who's not really a Christian nationalist.
He's kind of taken the middle of the road on this one.
Yeah, which is really just him blasting G3. Not blasting G3, blasting
He
CN.
lost both sides. I mean, he's trying to be a peacemaker in all this, I think.
But never mind.
Anyways, you have this huge divide going on right now,
Mhm.
and this book is what started it all.
Yeah.
It's only been out, I think it's been out for less than a year.
Less than a year. Um,
And the battle has been raging on Twitter for like ever since it's come out.
yeah. And it just kind of bothers me because for some reason overnight Christian Twitter has just gone dumb.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and you know the reason, I don't know about you, but the reason I wanted to go over this book was because I kept seeing like quotes being pulled out of it that seemed concerning for
Mhm.
sure and extreme, and I was like, surely in this book he's not saying what all these people say he's saying.
No.
Yeah.
I think that's just the general rule.
And
Is
I'm just gonna, G3 is never gonna see this, so I'm just gonna call them out because I won't have to face any repercussions. Um, but they're being really dishonest. It is clear that they haven't read the book because all of the things, all the concerns they brought out are literally addressed in the introduction to the book. And it's either dishonesty or they haven't read the book.
yeah, I mean,
Which, if they haven't read the book, is still being dishonest by acting like they've read it.
yeah. Just from reading the introduction, all of I read Scott's review of the book, Scott Aniel's, and honestly, it's just all been blown away. And um, really, it's I don't think it's Scott's doing. I think he's smarter than this, and I think someone else, Michael O'Fallon, is really just.
We can go down the conspiracy rabbit hole, but I don't know.
Mhm.
I really don't know what's going on, and it's really saddening because I was thinking like, wouldn't it be nice if we could just all be on the same team?
Yeah.
Like we don't have to bicker about this.
Hmm. I mean, like, okay, so my biggest problem with the anti-Christian national, I disagree with some of the parts of the book. Um, maybe more, maybe less than other people, but really, I think that whatever the faults in Wolf's reasoning are, it can be reformed.
Yeah, I mean, we need to get into the book soon, but
Mhm.
for me, I agree with a lot of Wolf's conclusions.
Mhm.
There's areas I agree with how he's getting there, and then there's areas I don't agree with how he's getting there.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, we end up at the same spot.
Yeah,
And I think Christian nationalism is just a step towards theonomy.
yeah,
So I would almost think we're maybe even a little more extreme than Stephen Wolfe is.
Well, we gotta remember that Calvin left out some stuff. Calvin did not talk about the Virginia Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Calvin did not talk about Mary. He did not talk about any of this stuff, and it had to be reformed
Mm-hmm.
by the reformers. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't. You don't have to agree with it right now. But you can agree with it later. But you can agree with the outcome of it by us reforming it.
Well, with that being said, let's hop into the book. And we're just going over the intro today. And let me tell you, it's meat the whole way through, even in the intro. So this book, I don't know if y'all can see this. It's thick. It's meat all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And most people just aren't going to read it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of for those people that aren't going to read it. We want to highlight, I think, the important parts and kind of explain it to where it's maybe understandable. But Kendrick, let's start with the intro. And it starts with the title called The Storm.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of recounts the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
What started it and what were the repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
Did anything particularly stand out to you in this intro to the intro?
I liked how, honestly, I liked the notion that the French Revolution was as bad as it was. It was, as Camus put it, as them sort of the French beheading God during the Revolution, as though God could die, and so it was not really. It was more of deicide, I think he says. Also now, it has brought about this sort of pietistic movement, where we get that Christianity is just my beliefs and my beliefs only, and does not affect the outer whole.
Yeah, and he on page 3, this is what he says, because he's arguing that since the French Revolution, this has become the norm for political life. He says the explicit absence of God in public life is now normal, and this new normal hardly needs official enforcement. With weakness of will and self-abnegation, Western Christians gaze at the ravishment of their Western heritage, either blaming themselves or, even worse, reveling in their humiliation. Christians today live and fully embrace the conditions of deicide. We have not simply tied our own hands, we've handed over without much fuss the divine powers ordained for our good. The people of God have become accustomed to a life without them, even learning to love abuse from God-granted authorities that he ordained for their good.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've never read something more true in my life.
Well, it's true. I mean, let's be honest. I think that all J3, all CNs can agree with that. I mean, how often do we talk about how we handed over on a silver platter the U.S.?
Well, and even think about it. Think about what the leaders are saying, whether it would be your more liberal Keller types or your G3, more premillennial types that are basically saying we need to basically just learn how to suffer faithfully down here. Don't ever, try to get Christians in positions of power to push Christianity on the culture. That's not what we're here for. We're here to share the gospel and suffer until the Lord comes back.
Yeah, it's almost like Dispy monasticism.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I don't disagree that we should suffer well, but I think we need to go beyond that because, believe it or not, the gospel impacts more than just you and your little heart. It impacts everything.
Mm.
It's the Kuyperian mantra.
Mm. Um, every
Not one square inch doesn't belong to the Lord.
yeah, um, you know, the mustard seed. I'm sure that the apostles suffered well, but that suffering well is the means to expand the gospel. Not only that, but but one of the aspects is suffering well is to impact the gospel in front of the whole world. Um, I mean, the mustard seed is supposed to grow. It's not going to grow. It's not going to grow by us. We already talked about this, but um, the the it's supposed to grow into branches.
Mm-hmm.
It's not supposed to just stay there. Um, the little light of ours needs to shine, and if it isn't shining, then something's wrong.
Yeah, believe it or not, I think that's probably an area we disagree with Stephen on.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's not post millennial, he's amillennial.
Yeah.
So he would probably make an argument along the lines of the darkness and the light kind of grow alongside each other until the end.
Well, that's not how light works. If
Well, sure.
but anyways, yeah, Stephen Wolf. Yeah, I think that it's impossible to implement these things without a little bit of post millennialism
Mm-hmm.
or even some optimistic Amil, maybe some maybe some progressive Despy that's been out there for like
Maybe.
5 minutes.
Well, there was one more thing I highlighted in here, and then if you have anything, feel free. But it was on page 4. It says Christianity is often used as a coping device for inaction, even when under tyranny and slavery. It is a theological means to psychologically endure one's Gnostic unwillingness to struggle against earthly abuse. So that kind of reiterates the point that for a lot of people, this is just their form of Christianity, their pietistic Christianity, is an excuse to not actually be faithful in the public realm, in the political realm.
Yeah.
And sorry, before you go there,
Mm-hmm.
you hear this from Christian leaders all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. They think about the every time there's an election,
Mm-hmm.
you always hear the Christian leaders saying, "The church is just too political. That's our problem. The church is too political." No, I promise that is not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we're not faithful in our politics.
Yep.
There is a Christian way to do it, and we are not doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he even says the Christian leaders, most, the Christian leaders most immersed in the modern West civil religion are those who loudly denounce the civil religion of Christian nationalism. Hold on. And they even Christianize the social creeds. That's basically him talking about how pietism has been used to sort of baptize atheism and secularism into office.
Let's explain pietism real quick, because I don't want to throw out words people may not know how we're using. What is pietism?
Pietism is just me and God. Just I basically it's just me and God in my Bible, and it's just a Christianity is just supposed to affect my heart and nothing else around me.
Yeah, Christianity only affects. Well, look, and there's a form of this that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, pietism isn't bad in of itself. Like, yes, you should have a personal walk with Jesus. However, Christianity goes beyond that. We should learn how to love our neighbors. So Christianity affects more than just you.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, when loving your neighbor and when your neighbor hates you and everything you stand for, they're going to interpret that love as hate. So you're going to encounter opposition. But guess what? Even though there's opposition, you're required to love your neighbor nonetheless.
Yeah. I mean, if sexual sin affects our body, then that I think that it would mean that virtues affect our body in a positive way. Therefore, it's not just your soul. It's not just you and your soul. It's you, your soul, and your body.
Mhm.
And if it's you, your soul, and your body, then I think that it would logically be with the government. I
Mhm.
think it would go into government social circles, and that's where um, and confessionalism has its strength. That it's not just you and the Lord. It's you and the Lord, but with a confessional doctrine that affects everyone.
Yeah, so let's move on
Oh,
to. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
hold on. Um, First, he talks about how Christians are required to affirm the language of universal dignity, tolerance, human rights, anti-nationalism, anti-nativism, multiculturalism, social justice, and equality. Um, so we would talk about this later, but I want to bring it. I
Sure,
like being
sure.
divisive. Um, so
He's just ready to get into the controversy.
uh, Tim, I have a question for you.
Yeah,
Is it wrong to be is it wrong to be a nationalist?
no, everyone's a nationalist,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get into this later in the book. But that's natural to human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Rightly ordered
Mm-hmm.
loves come natural.
Mm-hmm.
We understand this with our families. We love our families more than we love the people living next door. That doesn't mean you don't love the people next door. There's just a special kind of love
Mm-hmm.
for your family. And it's perfectly natural for that to expand to the state you live in,
Mm-hmm.
to the nation you live in. And just because you have a special love for your nation does not mean somehow you're ignoring, missions to all the other
Mm-hmm.
nations. It just means you put where you're at first.
So universal dignity is a Christian virtue. Um, why do we why ants do not have dignity? Monkeys do not have dignity. Only a creator who has created everyone in his image. Uh, Only with that premise we can have dignity. So I wonder, but it's we see this often with charity and with the poor. Um, it's just untethered conscious affection.
Mm-hmm.
It's you know we must destroy our lives for the poor. We must
Yeah.
give the whole kit and caboodle for the poor. If you're not giving everything you have to the poor, then something must be wrong with you.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, your family comes first. If giving to the poor causes damage to your first priority, your family, then you should not do it.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you don't give to the poor. I can already hear people arguing with me. It's
Mm-hmm.
not what I'm saying. I'm saying be financially responsible. Put your family first.
Mm-hmm. And yet we have allowed these secularists who say we must give up GDP, we must give up wealth, we must socialize the nation,
Mm-hmm.
and we must do everything just to impact one person. No, Jesus said you will always have the poor, but you see that untethered conscience is is what we're trying to baptize into the Christian faith.
Mm.
So let's press on.
All right. Well, he gets into the definition, and he talks about the past usage. I don't have much to say on that, to be honest, other than it's mostly used as a derogatory term, which is, I think, how most people are familiar with the term Christian nationalism. Um, but what interests me is how he defines what it is. So unless you have anything to say about that, I'm going to move into his definition.
Go ahead.
Okay. So here's his definition for Christian nationalism, page 9 in the middle. Christian nationalism is a Sorry, let me restart. Christian nationalism is a totality of national action consisting of civil laws and social customs, conducted by a Christian nation as a Christian nation in order to procure for itself both earthly and heavenly good in Christ. So he breaks down each point of that definition, but it's pretty short and succinct, and I generally agree with it.
Hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
So G3's been asking for a definition of Christian nationalism. Did y'all read the freaking book? I don't think so.
I mean, he gives a like a pretty good. I would say that everyone should agree with that. I mean, unless you want, you know, the nation to just run itself to the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what sane Christian would not want this?
Yeah.
But anyways, he breaks down each section,
Mm-hmm.
and starting on page 10, he basically says Christian nationalism is nationalism modified by Christianity. My definition of Christian nationalism is a Christianized form of nationalism, or put differently, a species of nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious your thoughts on that quote, because he's almost saying nationalism already exists. He's just arguing for a Christian form of it.
Yeah.
So the question is, what do those other forms of nationalism look like, and how does Christian nationalism look different?
Well, first of all, we already have a fancy term, a nice term for nationalism, and that's patriotism. And patriotism sounds nicer than nationalism because there are bad connotations with nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, let's be honest, the N in Nazi stands for nationalism.
Yeah.
What was it? No, the NA in Nazi stands for Nationalist Socialist Party. No one talks about the Z part.
No, yeah.
But anyways, I digress. I think nationalism can be a good thing. I mean, not loving your country is pretty darn bad. I mean, there can be aspects of there can be blind nationalism, there can be pseudo nationalism, there can be whatever is under the sun, but I think nationalism is a good term.
Yeah, the way I think about it, I think Christian nationalism is nationalism oriented toward loving one's neighbor and one's country. I don't think you can know how to love your neighbor unless you're a Christian.
Yeah. And plus, a while back, I looked up the difference between patriotism and nationalism, and honestly, they try and do some words, word gymnastics, but honestly, it's just basically the same thing. I'm just gonna say right now, the founders were nationalists.
Of course they were.
Mm-hmm.
What do y'all think they were? I mean, really?
I mean, they were nationalists. How else will we explain it? I mean, they're patriots. Patriots love their nation. And guess what? They wanted a nation full of patriots.
Yeah. Well, and there was one more thing that I had underlined before he kind of breaks down each section of his definition. And this part, I think, at first it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But then when I stopped and pondered it, I think I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on page 11, towards the bottom of the first paragraph. He says, nevertheless, the gospel does not supersede, abrogate, eliminate, or fundamentally alter generic nationalism. It assumes and completes it.
Yeah.
At first I was like, I don't like the way that sounds. But then I was like, you know what? It makes sense, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think I agree with it.
Yeah.
Because nationalism already exists. We've already covered that.
Mm-hmm.
but the gospel, I guess, assumes nationalism exists and shows us how to do it in a Christian way.
Yeah. Um, I'll give you guys a all points bulletin. The psalmists were nationalists. Um, they loved Israel. They said,
Mm-hmm.
if I forget Jerusalem, then let my right hand be cut off. Um, and so nationalism is sort of assumed in the Bible.
Yeah, what about when he prays to break the teeth of his enemies? I mean, it's not nationalism.
Yeah. Um, he who um, hate. I mean, there's just a lot of it, but I think that's a love that can be. I mean, let's be honest. The term love came before the Bible. It's just that the Bible completes it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It shows us how to. It
Yeah,
defines it.
and even completes it with the sacrificial death on the cross.
Okay, well, anything else before we move to the first part of his definition?
Go ahead.
Okay. So here's what he means in his definition by a totality of national action. I'm going to read a bit, so stick with me here. It's on page 12, middle paragraph. He says, a totality of national action being the formal cause of Christian nationalism refers to all the actions that a nation expects of its members for their overall national good. These range from great acts of sacrifice to mundane everyday things like caring for one's children. It is a totality because although each action has a good unique to it, that's weird. Together, each strengthens, supports, or makes possible other actions to form a organic whole. A mother nursing her child has the child's immediate good in mind, but that action, as part of a totality of action in the nation, is also for the national good, for the well-nursed children grow up to be healthy, productive, and sacrificial participants in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
So let me paraphrase this, and I'll get your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
From the smallest act of a household being established and a mother being home and nursing her child in a Christian way with her rightly ordered love, putting her children first. Think of that. Think of all the other households in your nation. Think of every mundane thing every person does.
Mm-hmm.
If they do it in a Christian way, that leads to a totality of national action.
Yeah. Um, well, obviously, I think you would have to be dumb to not agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, there's nations. What are nations but households but multiple households together with a ruler either appointed by the people or someone with a social contract to basically protect the people. Second of all, I mean, division of labor is just that. I mean, we have people in pest control who eliminate the bugs that we don't want to. We have people who are custodians because we need them to do that. We have politicians even though they're not needed. Uh,
For sure.
we have them because I mean I don't want to go out to Washington D.C. and represent 500 million people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is think about this. Think about how he brings it down to the micro level.
Mm-hmm.
What do all of our politicians, what is the attack on today? And we talk about this in the main podcast.
The attack is on the household.
Yeah, it's on the nuclear family.
Yeah.
All the time. Redefining marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Abortion on demand.
Mm-hmm.
Euthanasia is probably coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
All the attacks are on the micro, and we're all focused on what? The macro picture.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to be president?
Yeah.
That's not the issue, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bait and switch.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, the president's going to affect all that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. but we need to focus
Mhm.
on the micro a lot more than we're focusing on the macro.
It's kind of funny. We sort of become baptized socialists.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, socialists think that the government will control everything, but yet, um, but yet we say the households will. We need to have households, but yet we say we gotta pick the right president,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll solve everything. If we pick Ravi Shashaswamy or whatever his name is, um, I mean, he'll solve everything. If we vote for Nikki Haley, well, she'll solve whatever. If we vote for Mike Pence, he won't solve anything, but he'll.
Yeah. He'll sure pretend like he is, though.
Well,
He's one of the good Republicans.
he's one of the he's the G3 Republicans.
They're not gonna like that. Oh man. Okay.
I mean, he sure does look nice and he acts nice. He keeps his nose clean.
But he's useless.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the second part of his definition. Consisting of civil laws and social customs. What does he mean by that? Well, he explains. Civil laws and social customs are the material cause or content of Christian nationalism. These are rules of action that determine what you ought to do and ought not to do. Civil law commands action explicitly, while social customs implicitly predispose people to action. These rules are often very general, allowing people the freedom to choose among different options. For example, choosing one's vocation. Now, since the end of Christian nationalism is a nation's good, rules of action are proper only if they conduce to the nation's good.
Hmm.
Again, I don't disagree in the slightest with what he's defining here.
Yeah. I think that's where the G3 brothers will sort of disagree, because I think that they would disagree that we need to implement biblical biblical laws into the civil laws.
But that's not even what he's arguing.
Hmm?
He says implicitly. So he's saying generally and implicitly, the way we act as a nation kind of pushes people in the right direction. So I think an example of this implicit law under Christian nationalism, and this may be controversial, but if you're a Christian and you hear this and this rubs you the wrong way, please pause, think about it. So, right now in our nation, we have churches, we have mosques, we have satanic temples. Under Christian nationalism, there would only be churches.
Yeah.
And ideally, Protestant churches, that's an area of discussion we're just not at yet. But, and here's not what I'm saying. You would still be free to be a Muslim here. However, you would worship in private.
Yeah.
There'd be no public acts of worship. Now, as for Christianity, there would be churches. It would be encouraged for officials to be Christian. I think required, honestly.
Well,
that's why it was. That's why everyone swears on the Bible.
You beat me to it.
Do away with that. Yeah, sorry. But before, I'm going to hand it over to you, Kate.
No,
but
take your time.
Like, this rubs us the wrong way, but it shouldn't. We are Christians. Christianity is better, and we should do everything we can without pointing a gun to someone's head to push them in the right direction. Not forcing them, but helping them along to get there. And all these other things, multiculturalism just serves as an obstacle. It's not a good. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. So this is where I sort of see some cognitive disconnect, cognitive dissonance with Josh Bice. He was in Louisiana fighting for the end of abortion in Louisiana. Um, he is. I mean, all all the G3 bros argue for the abolition of abortion. However, they go like, oh, we should not have biblical laws. This is a point where I think G3 bros would again I correct my original statement, but I think that G3 bros should be on board with this.
And here's the thing:
Mm-hmm.
pragmatically, they are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jeff Durbin is very upfront about his laws and about calling leaders to repentance
Mm-hmm.
and making Christian laws,
Mm-hmm.
and they're helping him do that.
Yeah.
So it's like I really don't understand why they would be pushing so hard against the very thing they are practically doing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Is it just the title? I know it's not because of all the arguments on Twitter.
Maybe if it were Christian patriotism, it would be better.
Even then, I mean, patriotism is used in a derogatory way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they don't want to embrace the term Christian nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
So what's a good word for y'all?
Mm-hmm. There's one more thing I want to talk about with multiculturalism.
Sure.
We're going to talk about this later on. However, I will say that multiculturalism is really a bad thing. For instance, I'm not racist. I mean, I'm half white and half Hispanic. I mean, if I were racist, I would probably just shoot myself or something like that. Um,
He's a chemist.
Apparently, I'm a hater of my own kind.
There you go.
But, well, actually, I'm about to dunk on them. But,
Oh boy. Here we go.
so let's bring out Mexican culture. They have nice tacos, enchiladas. I could get on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
However, their fundamental culture is Catholic, and it is steeped in Mariology. Um, there's even a phrase that my grandma would say, and that would be Ave Maria, which is just basically a Holy Mary,
Mm-hmm.
and she uses that as sort of a surprise. Um, I think that there is a wrong that you cannot bring that into American culture, no matter how similar it is to Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
um, because otherwise you have a split in that mindset.
Well, I think even when you think about the Puritans that came here,
Hmm.
what were they escaping?
They were escaping Catholicism
Right.
and Anglicanism.
So, from the beginning, America has been Protestant.
Hmm.
We didn't start in 1776, guys. The Puritans were here before that,
Hmm.
and they impacted a whole lot
Hmm.
of how our country was founded. We just like to ignore that because they're icky Puritans.
Hmm.
But anyways,
Well, Josh Bice and Owen Strahan didn't mind having the Puritans sucking on the Puritans' graves.
yeah, dancing on their graves.
Yeah, with his big shiny shoes.
His dad's shoes, his dad's sneakers.
Well, I probably shouldn't talk about that because I have dad's sneakers too.
Well, I'll make fun of you. Don't worry.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. We have a lot to go, and we barely made a dent in the intro, guys.
We shouldn't be talking about dad's shoes.
This is going to be a few hours, I think.
Okay, before we get into the next thing,
Sure.
there's one thing I want to talk about. So, he's talking about formal cause and material cause. Next, he'll get into what is it? Next, he'll get into final cause, and I think the other one is effective cause. Those are the 4 or 5 causes of Aristotle, and that really got my juices flowing because of the fact that it's philosophy, and I love philosophy.
Yeah, that went over my head, to be honest.
Mm.
Glad you're here.
I I read the book and I was like, hold on, I know this.
But what about Aristotelian metaphysics?
Go on, I don't want to talk about it.
All right, let's keep going.
Fritz
Okay.
Zerba.
All right, page 14. Next part of his definition: conducted by a Christian nation as a Christian nation. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I will read how he expounds on this. In Christian nationalism, the nation is conscious of itself as a Christian nation and acts for itself as a Christian nation. Christian national consciousness is the ground and animating principle of its action. This is the efficient cause of nationalism,
There we go.
for it speaks of who is acting and also of the impetus of action. It is analogous to a man with faith in Christ who, understanding himself to be Christian man, acts as a Christian man for the good of body and soul, or is like a family of Christians who, seeing themselves as a Christian family, act as such for their earthly and heavenly good. Christian nationalism is a Christian people acting for their own good in light of their Christian nationhood.
Mm-hmm.
All that to say, a Christian nation acts as if it is Christian.
Yeah, I mean, we got atheist nations who act as atheists,
Mm-hmm.
and that essentially is the U.S. But never mind that. Um, I mean, there are Romanians, there in Romania, I think, who take if you're gonna do okay, this brings me back to a phrase my mom would say, or to my dad would say, and that is, "Do nothing half-butted." I'm censoring it. That is basically, if you're gonna do something, do it right.
Yeah, it's just saying, you know how you're a Christian? Act in a Christian way.
Mm-hmm.
A Christian nation should be self-aware that it's Christian and do things in a Christian way.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. That should be the most uncontroversial part of this book.
Mm-hmm.
Something tells me it's not, though,
I think it might be the most controversial thing in the book.
which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because we're talking, this is controversial to believers. That's really unfortunate.
I'm gonna spout out something, and it's basically the emperor has no clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Water is wet, grass is green, and India acts like a Hindu nation.
Yep.
China acts like an atheist nation.
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, well, I don't think it acts as a
Catholic nation.
no. It doesn't act as a Catholic nation, but it does act like a lawless nation.
Yeah.
You know, you can't really separate you can't. Oh gosh, I didn't realize that would be so controversial so early. You can't really separate the religion from the culture.
Yeah.
And the religion from the laws.
Well, that's what everyone says. That's what religion is.
Mm-hmm.
It's culture externalized. That's what the cultus is. That's culture. Or I'm sorry, I had it backwards. The culture is religion externalized.
Mm-hmm.
The culture derives its principles from the religious.
Yeah.
And everyone is religious, even if you're atheist.
Yeah, there's a reason why Saudi Arabia won't allow a woman who won a chess match who took her hijab out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that if Saudi Arabia, the government's officials in Saudi Arabia found out that someone in my college took off their hijab, that they won't be allowed back in Saudi Arabia because they're not acting like a Muslim, and they need to act like a Muslim nation.
Mm-hmm.
They actually need to walk the Muslim walk.
Well, anything else to add on that, Kendrick, before I move on?
I'm good.
Trying to move us along because this is gonna be. We might have to split this into 2 episodes.
I'm sorry, I'm holding it up.
Oh, you're fine. I mean, this is the thing. There's so much meat in this book, and this is the introduction. See how much conversation this sparks?
Mm-hmm.
When in reality it shouldn't. But, anyways, next part of his definition: to procure for itself both earthly and heavenly good in Christ. So imagine where the disagreement is going to be with this one is on the earthly good part.
Mm-hmm.
We only need to be focused on the heavenly good. Our citizenship is in heaven, not on this earth. All that nonsense we are always hear. But here's how he explains it.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually put a question mark next to this, so we'll see what I thought. In my generic definition of nationalism, I delineated earthly good and heavenly good. I did this because, as I argue in the next chapter, ordering people to heavenly life is a natural end for even the generic nation. That is, it is neither a new command nor something introduced by the gospel. Had Adam not fallen, the nations of his progeny would have ordered themselves to heavenly life. Thus, heavenly good is an end of the nation. So I imagine where I was confused was the part where it says, had Adam not fallen, the nations of his progeny would have ordered themselves to heavenly life. So, reading back now, I think I agree with it.
Yeah.
Well, here's where I was confused.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is just an area of thought that was foreign to me.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, had Adam not fallen, the argument is that he's making is that his children would have gone out and formed nations, and because there have been no sin, those nations all would have been Christian.
Yeah, I mean,
but I guess the area of debate would be, it's assumed that they would start nations.
Yeah, well, this is where we get into a Tower of Babel.
Yep.
I mean, if God punished them for not going out and for making this abomination, God had to literally kick them off of the tower and confuse the languages so that they would go out.
Yeah, and I think he talks about that later in the book, so I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves.
Oh, my bad.
But I think, that's the argument he's making. Like, Babel happened because they were rebellious and didn't go out and be fruitful and multiply and start nations. Instead, they all tried to basically form a way to become God.
Yeah. Also, let's go back to Adam before the fall. If he didn't fall, and he did not, I think essentially we would have nations building stuff and using the gold ore, and using everything for good. If you say it will be used for evil, then I'm sorry, but that's just heresy.
Yeah, it couldn't have been if Adam was unfallen, it could not have been.
They would not build nations where they say, "Hey, let's go eat of the fruit."
Yeah. Sin entered the world through Adam. Had he not sinned, sin would have not entered into the world.
Yeah. All the children will be like, "Hey, the children will not be like, let's pick up the fruit and divide it amongst ourselves." Now, I did have one thing that I disagreed with on.
Sure. All right, let's get into it.
So it's not really a big disagreement, but hence a Christian nation would, for example, support the spiritual administration of the word and sacrament.
That's funny that you disagree, because in mine I put capital YES. So what do you disagree with? This might be good discussion.
I think I would disagree. I think that a Christian nation should have the church as its primary outlook, but I do not think that it is I think the best way that helps support the word and the sacrament is by not getting involved with the church.
Yes, okay, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think he's making the point that the government gets their paws into, the pulpit
Mm-hmm.
and tries to control what they're preaching and everything.
Mm-hmm.
The way I kind of pictured it in my head is by the state, we could say, supporting churches would be think about like tax laws.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a way for the state to support churches,
Mm-hmm.
and even beyond like what I said earlier, like not allowing mosques
Mm-hmm.
to be built is a way of supporting churches.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think it's not the state's job to be writing the sermons for
Mm-hmm.
the pastors or to get into the ecclesiology of the churches. But I do think the state's job is to orient the citizens to a Christian form of nationalism.
You notice how I said small disagreement?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how you do act. That's how you do disagreements, people.
Oh, what, you talk about it? No, you can't talk about it.
Yeah, I think you might be right on that. I think you're probably right on that. But it's just an introduction. I don't expect much definitions.
Yeah, it's a thick book already,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it would just be good to sit down with Stephen Wolf and have him explain all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean, he did his best, guys. You see how thick the book is.
Mm-hmm.
Even so, that's still not enough for some people. And instead of reading it, assuming the best, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are just reading it and assuming the worst possible interpretation
Or
possible.
or if you have a disagreement, debate with him in public.
Owen Strahan, do it, you coward.
There's one last thing I want to underline. Despite that disagreement that I initially had, I did underline this part. A nation has no power in itself to bring anyone to to bring anyone internally to true faith. To realize heavenly good is to realize heavenly good in the individual.
Mm-hmm.
So notice he's not talking about Christians baptizing. The government
Drowning, yeah.
baptizing people. Oh no, Fritz Erba.
So yeah, he's still holding to separation of church and state.
Hmm?
Now, the way the pagans use the separation of church and state, this doesn't sound like that,
Hmm?
but this is actually what the separation of church and state is.
Hmm?
The state acts in a Christian way, in the way that God ordered it to, Romans 13.
Hmm?
The church acts in a specific way, the way God ordered it to.
Hmm?
And they don't need to, the state doesn't get to determine, it's not in the state's authority to interfere in the church, and it's not in the church's
Mhm.
authority to interfere in the state.
Hmm?
But they're both in submission to God still.
Donald Trump will not come at you with a gun and say, "Do you feel lucky?" Well, you better believe in Christ.
I wish he would, though.
That would be kind of funny, though.
He needs to get saved first. So,
Hmm.
all right. Well, I think that covers his definition, basically.
Oh goodness.
And here's the part of the book, okay, where this is the quote that everyone pulled out,
Hmm.
and it's on page 16 under method, and he says, "Assuming the Reformed tradition."
Hmm.
Here's the quote. "The first is that I assume the Reformed theological tradition, and so I make little effort to exegete the biblical text." This quote was basically thrown around by everyone in G3 to dismiss the whole book outright.
What's wrong with that? I mean,
Well, yeah, so I actually think this was a wise move on his part.
hmm
Because here's what would have happened had he not relied on the reformers.
Mhm.
Everyone would have said, "This is new. You're making this up. This is not historical, and therefore we're going to dismiss you."
or we get sacramentalism.
Yeah.
You're a good little papist, you know.
Mm-hmm. But I think there was no way to win
Mm-hmm.
on his part, because had he not
Mm-hmm.
assumed the Reformed tradition, people would have criticized him for that. And had he simply, well, I think what he did was smart.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to rely on the Reformers for this one.
I mean, why not? I mean, I don't get people. I mean, we, I mean, we're reformed already. What's wrong with assuming the reformed tradition on this part?
You know, what's funny is at the bottom he says, I've chosen to assume this system and work from it. I am unable to exegete better than the Reformed exegetical tradition anyway, and I will frequently cite theologians whose work, to my mind, demonstrates the soundness of the Reformed system.
Hmm?
Amen. I also cannot exegete better than Augustine and Luther and all of them. I'm an idiot.
I mean, come on. The first thing I go to is Calvin whenever if I cannot understand a text, the first thing I go to is Calvin.
And here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
That still means this is a theological book, because he says he's relying on their exegesis. Therefore, the exegesis is still in the book.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, he says it's not an overall work of political theology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we can't do that in this day and age. We just simply can't. Uh, how much, how much of of the politics is socialized and secularized? First of all, we have to get a work. We have to get a. He's trying to get a working definition out. He even says this in the definition. He's getting a working nationalist argument out, so we can get this scene, so we could get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and there's one more thing I highlighted, and I think this is important, because I might slightly disagree with this, depending on how you define it.
Hmm?
Page 17 at the bottom.
No, no,
But since I pull mainly from the 16th and 17th century, in which Reformed theology was very Thomistic and Catholic, many of my theological premises are widely shared among Christians. So, from his own admission, a lot of the ideas from the 16th and 17th century came out of the Catholic Church through Thomas Aquinas, and that tradition is called Thomism. Now, I am not extreme, I think, in either direction. I think Aquinas can have good things to say. I think he has probably a lot of bad things to say.
mm-hmm.
So I'm willing to take him and assess him on the merits of what he's saying. I don't know if that makes me a Thomist,
Mm-hmm.
because I think the definition is unclear.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I think the definition for biblicist is unclear.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just not willing to dismiss everything he has to say outright.
Well, first of all, like I said, we can reform it later.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, and I think the way this impacts the book
mm-hmm.
is through natural theology, which to some degree is true. Like, obviously, read Romans 1, there is a form of natural theology. I think it just depends on how far you go with it.
Yeah. You know, I think I'm not really. I think I'm further to the reformed side, or to the anti-Thomist side.
Yeah, to the reformers' side.
Yeah, but honestly, I can work with it. I even just said I'm just gonna leave it out. I think if we went, first of all, I think we can reform it. That's what Doug talks about, and I think that he's heavily theonomist. He goes the way of the reformers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like it. You know, I think that we could go this route and reform it later. It doesn't have to be perfect right now.
Yeah.
I mean, are we gonna nitpick everything as we go down to hell?
Well, this is a common way to just dismiss people's argument, is to be like, oh, well, they're a Thomist, so I'm going to ignore everything they have to say.
Mm-hmm.
I generally don't like to play the fallacy card, but that is the genetic fallacy. Like, you can't just dismiss someone because they're also this other thing. They can say true things still,
Mm-hmm.
whether I disagree with them now on Thomism.
And to be honest with you, I agree with a lot he says. So,
Mm-hmm.
even if he goes a Thomas route, I can still say, come on, brother, let's get this ball rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and we'll see how that plays out in the rest of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But the next section, he gets into natural theology,
Mm-hmm.
ironically, and he said he proceeds from natural principles.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what he writes. The primary reason that this work is political theory is that I proceed from a foundation of natural principles. While Christian theology assumes natural theology as an ancillary component, Christian political theory treats natural principles as a foundation, origin, and source of political life, even Christian political life. And he then says, I call this a work of Christian political theory because I rely on both natural and supernatural propositions.
Mm-hmm.
An example, from what is true from nature and from revelation. Okay, I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah.
You need natural revelation,
Mm-hmm.
okay, natural theology, and you need revelation, and Scripture is a form of revelation.
I'll just go with revelation, and I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Well, that's fine. But here's the thing, okay? Romans 1 does teach certain things
Mm-hmm.
about God.
Yeah.
And there are certain laws written on the human heart. We
Mhm.
all know naturally murdering is wrong.
Yeah.
Therefore, we can have laws saying murder is wrong.
Yeah.
But also, we have scripture that directly says, thou shalt not murder.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, guys. My dog was crying in the other room. He has joined us currently in between me and Kendrick.
Mm-hmm. He's a good little boy.
Yes. Where did we leave off? All right. So, talking about scripture and natural revelation, he ends by saying this. For example, assuming that civil leaders ought to order the people to the true God, a natural principle, we can conclude that civil leaders ought to order the people to the triune God. Why? Because the triune God is the true God, a supernatural truth.
Mm-hmm.
Agree.
Yeah.
Find that pretty hard to disagree with. So, any thoughts before we move on?
I would not feel comfortable saying no to that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Under the title Complexity, he says, Christians resort to rhetorical devices, tweetable shibboleths, and credibility development to assert desperate principles and applications. I've decided to return as best I can to an older style, though I am an infant in comparison to their learning and abilities. As a result, my arguments are often not simple. I try to prove my most important conclusions such that if you accept the premises, you would have to accept the conclusion by the force of the logic. I just highlighted that because I'm like, yeah, it's true. The way we approach these debates is simply, getting your jab in on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, being thoughtful and engaging, especially this book on the merits of what's in it, has not been done by those who are criticizing it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, let's be honest. Annual cherry-picked the quotes.
Mm-hmm. And they're all from the intro.
Mm-hmm. And he decided, hey, I'm going to use this very tweetable quote.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest more. Desiring God has a quote that you could just tweet that is an instant tweet.
Mm-hmm.
G3 has quotes that are instant tweets. I gotta tell you, in the West, we do not like thoughtful arguments.
Yeah, because that actually requires work.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? People, when you haven't read the book, it's going to be easily discovered.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read it. I know y'all didn't read the book.
Yeah, I mean, all just from this little section, I can tell that you guys did not read the book.
Yeah, and it's especially egregious when you get to his definition of ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get there. Don't worry, guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Under section 5, he gives a summary of his argument. And this is where he kind of breaks down the book. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this might be where we split it right here.
Mm-hmm.
But he says, in chapters 1 and 2, I discuss man in his 3 states: the state of integrity, the state of sin, and the state of redemption or restoration.
Amen, brother.
These follow the familiar reformed schema of creation, fall, and redemption.
Amen, brother.
I describe man in each state and how the events of the creation, fall, and redemption affect and change man. The purpose is to establish the continuity, thank you, and discontinuity between the 3 states.
Amen. Just even just Christian, just Christian doctrine.
Sounds like he's just going through basic anthropology in the first chapters.
Mm-hmm.
He also says Adam was equipped with all the skills and natural drive to accomplish this task. Indeed, fulfilling the dominion mandate was natural to him, as his telos, or natural end. This should sound familiar to y'all if y'all have listened to our season 1 of the podcast.
Mm-hmm. The time to binge is now. That's my advertisement. I'm done for it.
There we go. The rule to this end was the natural law. The obedience to the natural law is manifested in dominion. If Adam had not fallen, he and his progeny would have multiplied on the earth. They would have formed communities, for no man can live well alone when not in combination with others.
You see, this is where I'm disappointed with him.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm disappointed with him because he did not use the classic C.S. Lewis quote, "No man is an island."
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Honestly, I think this tanks the book.
Book is trash.
Yeah, exactly. I'm comfortable calling him a papist pig now.
There we go. Yeah, but we already kind of touched on this. He's just making the argument that if Adam had not fallen, nations still would have formed.
Yeah.
But now that he has fallen, we're still required to fulfill the dominion mandate. We're just going to have to deal with the thorns and thistles that are in the way now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's called the Tower of Babel, guys. Just.
All right. Well, anything highlighted? I have a few more things, but I don't want to.
No, I think that I'm good for now. I mean.
Okay. Well, there's one more quote I wanted to read. At the bottom of page 23, pursuing Christian dominion is not seeking to bring heaven on earth, nor is it seeking to earn heaven by works.
Oh.
One does not place himself back under the covenant of works by seeking to establish Christian civil communities on earth. As I said, even prelapsarian Adam, that's pre-sin Adam, could not bring heaven to earth through his labor. He could only order earthly life to the promised heavenly life. That is precisely what restored humanity does in his labor, order earthly life to heavenly life. The difference is that Christ is the sole means to heavenly life. Earthly life is ordered to Christ mainly by supporting his visible church. This, I think, might be a difference we have with him.
Yeah. I'm sure you heard me go like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with some parts of it.
Yeah.
It's not us bringing heaven to earth, okay? However, Christ is.
Mm-hmm.
He is making his enemies a footstool.
Yeah. Your kingdom come, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually the heavenly Jerusalem will come at a time we do not know. But
we do know Christ will defeat all his enemies and then hand the kingdom over to the Father.
Yeah.
And we are clearly not there yet.
Yeah. We're not Gary DeMar, but we're also not Hagee.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is, I think, one of the key differences we're going to have with him is he's perfectly consistent with amillennialism with what he said.
Hmm.
We're just not that.
Yeah. I mean, I think over time, postmillennialism will will have to define this nationalist argument
Mm.
as, and plus, you cannot really have this discussion without without the postmillennial mindset.
Yeah, and I don't know, aside from postmillennialism, how this would be accomplished. Really,
Hmm.
how are enemies defeated aside from Christ defeating them?
Well, I didn't want to bring this up, but he talks about light just traveling with the darkness, but light does not do that. If we really want to take Jesus' quote to the maximum, um, we would have to say that light overcomes
Mm-hmm.
darkness, just as the scripture says, and that um, and that light just breaks apart darkness.
Yeah, and this is why I say I think we're even more extreme than Wolf is, because we're looking for God's all of God's law to be enshrined, not just the Ten Commandments. So Kennedy's really enjoying petting my dog right
Look, okay,
now.
it's nice. He feels nice. I
Oh,
love
he's
him.
falling asleep.
He, I mean,
Kendrick's having a therapy session right now.
mm, more like I'm giving him a therapy session.
You're both giving each other therapy.
Hmm.
Well, anything else before I move on, Kendrick?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah. All that to say, even if we disagree, we can still move in the same direction with Wolf. So.
Hey, it's not my fault that I'm petting your dog. He's asking for it. He is literally asking for it.
All right. Nation and nationalism. This is going to be what he's going to go over in chapter 3. My approach to the nation is different from that of others. Instead of relying on a bird's eye view of the concept, I mainly appeal to the reader's own experience with people and place to reveal to them their own belonging to a people and place. Now, that's one of those quotes you can take out of context and just be like, this is just relativism.
Yeah.
But when you let him explain his words,
Hmm.
he says, that is, I appeal to what I hope is common experience. I can do this because the previous chapters demonstrated that neither the fall nor grace eliminated the natural instinct for an attachment to people and place. Grace does not destroy natural affection, and our basic experience with regard to people and place reflects the way God created us. So he's appealing to natural revelation again, saying, look, the law of God is written on everyone's heart. This is ontological. This is unmovable, so I can appeal to that.
Hmm.
I don't think that goes far enough, personally.
Yeah.
Because I think people suppress that. So I think when people are suppressing that, that's not necessarily something you can appeal to.
Hmm. I mean, there's not really much of natural affection going on in Ohio right now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, they've clearly suppressed that. Natural affection for one's child, yes, is natural. But they've suppressed that and put something unnatural in place, which is
Hmm.
being able to kill your child up until birth.
But besides that, wow, look at me! I'm going to become a Thomist now. I'm going to say that that the Greeks had a certain idea of natural affection. It's called storge, and wow, pulling the Greek up in here, wasn't expecting that. Um, and that you know they had a sense of natural affection, but it was incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
And now with the gospel, we have a complete natural affection. Wow, I have really just become a Thomist, huh?
Don't tell James.
Man, I feel bad now. But anyways, you know, um, we have we we now can serve our neighbor with a natural affection. I mean, the gospel doesn't come in and you suddenly just hate your mother, and
Right.
you don't hate.
Oh, but what about what Jesus said to Mary when he said, "The people that are my brothers and sisters are those that follow me."
I didn't realize we are getting into a cult. I did not realize that that Christianity was Mormonism
Mm.
or that Bob Jones religion. Um, you know, we're supposed the law's still there. We're supposed to love our mother and our father, love our neighbor as ourselves, love the brethren. But you know, and amongst that is natural affection. And guess what? Guess what? The nation's made of. It's made out of your brothers and your sisters, and you know, whether by nature or by blood.
And while you're saying that, he addresses it, and this is going to lead us into his definition of ethnicity. But he says, I argue that natural inclination to dwell among similar people is good and necessary. Grace does not destroy or critique it. Choosing similar people over dissimilar people is not a result of fallingness, but it is natural to man as man.
He's a kinist.
I mean, yeah, that he's not, but that sounds controversial. Dwelling among, choosing to only dwell among similar people, that's highly bigoted. That is not the gospel. That's not being salt and light in a Christian witness.
Okay, let's go even further with this. Um, are you gonna go to a hockey game with someone who doesn't like hockey?
No, that would be miserable.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I gotta be honest with you. I do not go to Mexicans and just be like, "Oh, you love tortillas too? Let's hang out." Um,
Yeah.
uh, I'm kind of I'm a foreigner with both nations, honestly. The white people don't like me, and Mexican people don't like me.
Mm-hmm.
So, except for you, for some reason, I'm not sure
Well,
why.
sometimes.
Sometimes, well, I forgot. But you know, I think that it's just natural for you to do that. I mean, is it impossible for like a Polish guy just to go like, I'm just gonna hang out with the New Yorkers? No, he's gonna go to the Polish sect in New York City. The Jew from Israel is not gonna go like, you know what, I'm gonna go hang out in Harlem. No, he's gonna go to the Jewish part of New York City. The
Yeah, there's something I want to say, but I'm like, is it even worth it? Is it worth the possible backlash?
well, I'm just gonna say this. Um, in Japan, basically this whole kinnis thing is sort of an American issue.
Yeah, or in Africa, go to Africa.
Hmm.
They're all chemists.
Yeah, if you go,
That's not necessarily a bad thing.
I think it's just affected our American mindset. If you go to Japan, there are places that South Koreans cannot eat at. I mean, and if you go to South Korea, there are places where Japanese people can't eat at.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna go there. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get canceled. Um, Generally speaking, do certain ethnicities, the way we think about it,
Mm-hmm.
based on, the color of your skin,
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, are there certain cultures that come along with that?
Yeah,
I think, yeah, that's pretty basic, right?
I mean it's just regional.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a tribe of people from Africa
Mm-hmm.
and you place them in America, there's going to be a specific, unique culture that comes with them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in America, this is. I'm going to try to be as careful as I can with my words.
Be careful.
We are under an intense racial divide here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There are certain cultural practices that are behind this.
Mm-hmm.
And the solution is not simply mixing them all together, because that's
Mm-hmm.
how you cause a lot of strife. And I'm saying generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, there are people in all different types of cultures that don't mesh with the culture commonly associated with their skin
Mm-hmm.
color. Okay, me and you,
Mm-hmm.
we're hanging out here.
Mm-hmm.
We're fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it does come natural for certain cultures and ethnicities to stick with their own.
Yeah.
I know that's like basic to say,
Mm-hmm.
but that's something that could easily get us canceled in our
Yeah.
culture today.
Um, that's why I've just been going with non. So if my mother, my if so, I have parents that are. I have a parent that's Mexican. My
Mm-hmm.
mother. She would not. I bet she felt more comfortable in El Paso for some odd time, um, ra- rather than DFW until she got acclimated to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, However, I will say this: the best way to transfer to the best way to I think the only way to for a group of foreigners to harmonize with each other is through the gospel.
Right.
Um,
And, I think of Israel a lot when I think of this.
mhm,
So, Israel was the people of God, okay?
mhm,
The Old Testament.
mhm,
You have a lot of laws about how Israel's supposed to treat the sojourner, right?
mhm,
However, people entering Israel were required to acclimate to that culture there.
mhm,
Israel also had strong laws from God saying, hey, don't intermix with other cultures.
mhm,
This needs to be uniquely God's culture.
mhm,
The problem with America today is we do not have a shared culture
mhm,
that people acclimate to.
mhm,
We are supposed to acclimate to everyone else's culture. And that's why there's so much strife
mhm,
and divide and, frankly, hatred for each other.
mhm. And I would say the culture that they are supposed to acclimate to is the Christian culture.
Yes, and that's what he's arguing for in the book.
Mhm,
It needs to be Christian nationalism, a specifically Christian culture
mhm,
that when people come in are required to acclimate to.
mhm. Yeah, tacos and enchiladas are fun, but without Christ are nothing.
Yeah, and that's a basic example, but like think about the mosques.
Mhm,
People brought those with them, right? Well, maybe we should listen to God's law on this one and not intermix with ungodly cultures.
mhm. Yeah. So,
Frankly, you have secularist cultures as well, which is, I think, the dominant one here in
mhm,
the U.S.
mhm. like I said, not racist. It's not racist. I mean, come on, I would shoot myself at this point.
Yeah, I'm not making any statement about how anyone's superior to anyone else.
No.
It's not at all what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to hear that,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, but that's not what I'm saying.
I'm going to say this right now. If you think your skin color is superior to another one's, you're stupid.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
stupid.
if you think that you're, if you think that you being white gives you a superiority to those who are black, brown, yellow, white,
Mm-hmm.
I'm black, brown, yellow, orange. I don't care.
I would be the orange one, right?
Oh yeah, you would be the orange.
Racist.
Hey, look, red and white make orange. Um, but
But we know this. I mean, look at how the voting laws always
Mhm.
break down.
Mhm.
What culture is almost, I'll say 90% voting for abortion?
well, that would be black people.
Yes.
Mhm.
That is a cultural thing there.
Mhm.
That's not saying they're inferior to white people, but it is saying there's something inherently wrong there
Mhm.
that needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Abortion is never okay.
Mhm.
And for some reason,
Mhm.
in their culture, it is seen as something needed.
Anglo-Saxon culture, some point there was some at some point before Christianity that it needed to be changed, and it did change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we should ask people to do. We are asking for nothing new. Just repent of the sins that you have
Yep.
committed.
Well, anyways, now that we're canceled, went on a tangent there. But let's move on. Chapter 4, Christian Nation and Christian Nationalism. He says, I discussed the Christian nation and I addressed one major feature of Christian nationalism, the civil support for the true religion. The Christian nation is a nation of Christians in which their everyday life is infused and or adorned with Christian practices. So I think this is going to be a major contention with the G3 guys. Kind of touched on this already, but the civil support for true religion.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think it all comes down to how that is implemented. I don't think the church should have the state should have their fingers in what the church is doing.
Yeah.
But they should orient people to want to go to the church.
Yeah. Donald Trump will not administer the sacraments.
Yeah. Oh, I could only imagine.
Joe Biden does not preach the sermon,
Well,
no matter.
didn't talk either.
Well, that's true. Probably a bad example. Um, you know, I think that the best way to do it was what the founders originally did,
Yep.
which is to get out of the way and let the gospel spread. I think that the best idea that government had was to just shut up and to just allow the gospel to be preached.
Yeah, but they even specifically said, "Hey, this is going to fail if this isn't a moral people."
Yeah, and that's why the separation. That's why the same guy, well, the same group of guys that said separation of church and state. It's not so that there is no identity. Is the idea that you just get out of the way and let that cult impact the culture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not using a derogatory term, I promise.
In the cultist way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that one. It's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
We can get more specific as we get into that chapter.
Mm-hmm.
But, all right, chapter 5. It's going to be one of those controversial ones. Cultural Christianity. In chapter 5, I defend cultural Christianity instead of defining it by its abuse, which is
Mm-hmm.
what everyone in the church does.
Mm-hmm.
It's solely defined on its abuse.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I define it as a supplemental mode of religion, which means that it supplements the work of spiritual ministry. It implicitly orders people to the Christian faith, though it cannot bring anyone to faith.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think of this as the opposite of having the NOW sign on the bumper car, on the bumper of your car.
Mm-hmm.
Was it the "Not of This World" sign?
Yeah.
Or you get the
NOTW.
What?
It's NOTW.
I'm sorry, I'm a pig. But anyways, let's taco about Jesus. Sure. I think that it's more of a idea that you have people not pooping on the sidewalk, and you don't have women dressed in bikinis at school.
Mm-hmm. And even think about this. Here's, I think, a good example. Closing businesses on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
That orients people towards what?
That orients people to see the importance of the Sabbath. Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know. Even Christians don't like that one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, Chick-fil-A does it.
What's wrong with that?
Literally everyone else can do it.
Mm-hmm. And
it's one day, guys.
And before we get all the what about blah, we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Let's hash it out. Let's hash out the topic, and then we can talk about what we do with blah. What we do with blah.
Yeah. Don't be triggered just because you hear two words. Like, please just think about it. I know cultural Christianity is one of those things that will immediately trigger people, but please, let's put on our thinking caps for this one. All right, moving on. Civil law. And I wrote disagree under what I highlighted, so
Oh,
interesting. Only God can bind the conscience. Fellow man cannot, except by divine sanction, command you to do this or that in a particular thing. Man as a moral being is bound only by the natural law, God's moral law, as a rule for his action. But the natural law in itself does not prescribe specific action. It must be applied. So I probably disagreed with that because I'm a theonomist, if I were to guess.
Mm-hmm.
I generally, I agree that natural law can only go so far.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would think that it was Aquinas who tried to stretch it a little too far. But besides that, I mean, like I've always tried to say, I like to I like to eat the meat, spit out the bones.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, we don't have time to be overly picky. But this is a pretty good thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that we need to be. Someone's just going to use that out of context. I just know it.
It moves the needle in the right direction.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Is that it's a positive. It's a positive good, and we can reform it later on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny is I wrote agree under this next part I highlight.
Mm-hmm.
Civil law can direct men only outwardly. It cannot command the soul. The conscience is free from coercion. Still, civil law can outwardly order people to that which is good for the soul. Thus, Sabbath laws are just because they remove distractions for holy worship. Laws can also penalize open blasphemy and irreverence in the interest of public peace and Christian peoplehood. The justification for such laws is not simply that God forbids these things at the first table of the Ten Commandments, but that they cause public harm both to body and the soul. I could give many examples of why I agree with this.
Yeah.
Think about abortion. You can't fix the heart that wants to kill the child.
Mm-hmm.
Only God can do that.
Mm-hmm.
However, having laws that prevent you killing your child does protect your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Because the soul that kills a child, yeah, you're going to face repercussions for that. A lot of people want to deny it. A lot of women want to. And maybe to a point they sear their own conscience.
Mm-hmm.
But having that law, which prevents it, good thing.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
But okay, here's another area of criticism from G3. He talks about blasphemy laws.
Oh no, let's not talk about that.
I don't think they take blasphemy seriously enough.
Really? I mean,
I think God takes it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And under his law, you get death for blasphemy.
Yeah.
That's how seriously God takes it.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we feel like we are more just than God when it comes to blasphemy?
Well, I defend blasphemy laws on the regular. There's a reason why it was taboo to burn the American flag. If you burn the American flag, you and that's why I think that the stupid ruling shouldn't have been enforced.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you burn the American flag, you're essentially showing that there is no unifying factor in anything. And that's among the myriad of reasons why we have these things go on today. If you disgrace the name of God, then I think that you should be penalized.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
But and even think about it now. There are certain words you cannot say in America,
Mhm.
and you will get penalized for it. You will lose your job.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, anything else to say on that?
That's about it.
All right. Sorry, this is going long, guys. I knew it would.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 7, The Christian Prince.
There is no Christian prince, and there is no milkshake
All right.
in the Bible. That
Chapter 7 investigates the chief agent of Christian nationalism, the Christian magistrate. I chose to use Christian prince because prince connotates a great man, not a bureaucrat or a policy wonk. Our time calls for a man who can wield both civil power to great effect and shape the public imagination by means of charisma, gravitas, and personality. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, you really want. This is where I see some cognitive dissonance again. I mean, G3 bros reformed. Well, mostly.
Depends on how you define it, really.
But I mean, they go to they love Samuel Rutherford and John Owen, but yet this is just theonomy. Christian Prince is theonomy. And plus,
Well, what's funny is they seem to paint it as this guy is not working through legal means.
mm,
I don't think that's what Wolf is arguing for. Maybe he is.
no, that's not what he's arguing for.
I think he's arguing for a man using legal means and through his charisma and I don't know, just his gravitas and personality, he's able to win people over that way.
Yeah.
And become kind of a leader.
I mean, he's not advocating for
A coup.
a coup. He's not advocating for the opposite of Lex Rex.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty basic. I don't feel the need to read more. I think that pretty much dismisses all of the nonsense that I've seen floating around.
I mean, in Wolf's mind, Lex is still Rex.
Yeah. Okay. Revolution. This chapter on revolution. And this, I think, is good, especially going into our season 2, because we're going to deal with the idea of revolutions.
Yeah.
But here's what he says. Whether Christians may violently resist tyrannical authority was once debated among Christians. Hoping to reignite this debate, in Chapter 8 I argue that Christians are morally permitted to violently remove tyrants. The right to revolution follows from a civil ruler's mediatorial role, and the fact that his power was ordained by God for the good of civil communities. It is not ordained for evil. Thus, any civil command to do evil or abstain from what is good is not a command from God, nor is it backed by divine power. It is a command of men, and no man by his own power can bind another man's conscience to action. To resist such power is not to resist God, but to resist tyrannical man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen.
Yeah, I think this is where the Romans 13 abuse just falls flat.
Mm-hmm.
Because it clearly says, what? Government was created for what? To reward the righteous, to punish the evildoer. When the government does what it's been doing in America for 50 plus years, 70 plus years, where it rewards the evildoer and punishes the good, it's okay to resist.
And I want to throw this into the monkey, and throw a wrench into the G3 factory. I mean, the American Revolution was called the Presbyterian Revolution.
Yep.
I mean, how else are you going to view it?
You know, Kendrick, I just came to the realization, if there's anything that's going to get us on the FBI watch list, if we're probably already on it. It's probably this discussion right here. The revolution discussion.
Yeah. But we're,
If we're on the list, we're moving up a few notches with this one.
but we're not telling everyone to get their guns and
Yeah, obviously not.
don't get your guns. Don't you know? Don't get your pitchforks and your guns. Just you know, let's just try and work this out. Civilly.
Yeah, let's use any peaceful means possible.
Hmm. And let's be honest, if they're gonna criticize us for this, well, they gotta put the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, all onto the
Boston Tea Party.
yeah. They're gonna have to just destroy all evidence, and then you get 1984.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's how the country was founded.
Boom.
By revolution. Like, I'm sorry.
By the Presbyterian Revolution.
And what's even crazy is you have Christians saying that was sinful.
Mm-hmm.
Based on Romans 13.
Mm-hmm.
Guys,
Well,
we are better theologians than this.
I was originally one of them, but then I saw a revolution in in the Second Chronicles.
Yeah, here's a basic argument for why it's okay to resist. Government is government because it has specific duties to fulfill from God. When government is taking duties not assigned to them by God, that is not government.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you can ignore it and resist it. You just need to define what government is.
Mm-hmm.
But we think, well, man can define what government is, and that's ordained from God, and you submit to it.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not what Romans 13 teaches.
Man, I would hate to see the evangelifish if America implemented a one-child policy.
Oh my gosh, they'd be like, oh, well, I have to submit. Here's my child for abortion.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, to be fair to them, they would say, unless it's sin, you submit to it.
I know, but I mean, just like, well, what are we supposed to do after that? I mean, are we just gonna be like, okay, let's not do anything? I mean, the priest in First Kings blah 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 resisted, violently resisted, the queen's orders and made the rightful heir to the throne, one of David's children, into the throne. I mean, that's why you read your whole Bible, guys.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this weakness in our theology came to a head during the vax mandates.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people who took that stance on Romans 13 started to sound like they took a different tone at that point.
Mm-hmm.
MacArthur. But yeah, I think a lot of people are rethinking that approach to Romans 13 because I don't think it's a very thoughtful one.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, all right. Let's keep trucking along, guys. We're getting close to the end, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Liberty of conscience. Since my argument seeks to justify the political and social privileging or exclusivity of Christianity, questions naturally arise about the liberty of conscience, religious liberty, and religious toleration. These are legitimate and serious questions, for I affirm that the conscience is sacred and free, and that no civil ruler has jurisdiction over the conscience. But there are many misunderstandings today concerning what Protestants once believed about the role of civil government with regard to false religion. Chapter 8 seeks to address those issues and misunderstandings. Okay, here's what he says. Everyone agrees that the civil magistrate cannot compel things that are properly internal, such as belief or feelings. Agree. That he must not punish one for simply holding a false belief. Agree. That he must not punish in order to reform an errant mind. Agree. That he must not punish someone whose false religion causes no outward harm. Agree. I think.
Yep.
The classical Protestant position is that the civil magistrate can punish external religion, like heretical teaching, false false rights, blasphemy, and Sabbath breaking, because such actions can cause public harm, both harm to the soul and harm to the body politic. Thus, the civil restraint of false external religion is not punishment for offending God, but the prevention of public harm. The role of government is to act upon society to remove what outwardly prevents or hinders man from achieving his ends, including his supernatural end. Thoughts?
I think he goes a little too far.
I don't think he went far enough. Go ahead.
I think he went a little too far. I don't think we could punish heretical beliefs. I think that would be. I think that if you want to call it a punishment.
He didn't say heretical beliefs. He said heretical teaching.
Heretical teaching. My bad.
So think about like I don't know, Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Think about what would have happened if the state had intervened. Mormonism would not be here.
Well,
I know it's tough. It's tough.
I would say that I don't think that Joseph Smith should have been allowed to move out of Utah. I move out to Utah. I don't think that he should have been allowed. In fact, I think that if anything, if he was spreading something, he would have to be he would have to be secluded to his home and not be allowed to teach it. Is that penalized?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you do it. I'm not calling for like the death penalty on Joseph Smith, but like the state intervening and saying, "Hey, cut it out."
Okay, yeah.
Okay, think about this. A lot of people will be like, "No, that sounds terrible."
Mm-hmm.
Do Satanists have a right in the public square to be talking about Satanism?
No.
Or to put up Satanist statues?
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Like, I think that makes it brutally clear the point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Okay, I could get along with that.
Like, yeah, I mean, I find it really difficult if you're a Christian and you want to argue for a Satanist right in the public square to blaspheme God and put up Satanist statues. I think you're missing something here.
I agree. I'm good with that.
I mean, I'm sure David French is all for it, but personally, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And Russell Moore.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not for the putting up of idols in the marketplace, but
it's just a blessing of democracy.
Personally, I'm not I'm gonna take a hot take, okay?
Okay, I love hot takes.
I'm just gonna say this: people should not be putting idols in the park. That's my hot take.
Wow, my brain has exploded.
I know.
No, I mean, to me, that sounds like perfectly reasonable.
Hmm.
But I think to the untrained Christian mind, that probably does sound like a hot take.
But also, I think that the government... Okay, maybe I was just thinking of the death penalty. Because I would say that person should not be allowed... That's where the government should intervene and be like, you know what? Stop it.
Yeah, I don't know about death penalty.
Maybe heavily taxed.
There's got to be worth the animus, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, not heavily taxed, I guess.
There's got to be something in God's law about that, right?
There's got to be something. Well, we know what the outcome would be.
Yeah, I mean blasphemy laws for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think a Satanist putting up a statue would be blasphemy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, we're not at the point where we even need to get into that.
Mm-hmm. That's generation 2.
Yeah, that's after Christian nationalism. That's when we're a theocracy, okay?
Mm-hmm. You said theocracy.
Oh, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the last chapter, he just talks about the Anglo-Protestant experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel a whole lot of need to cover that right now. It's not really part of the meat of the book, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll conclude the introduction.
Mhm.
I'm exhausted.
All right.
And that's just the intro.
So I think we should just close and go like, we're back, guys, and we're hotter than ever.
That's right. I'm more exhausted than ever. But we just want to cover this to kind of help people think through it a little more.
Mhm.
Our small little audience who may have heard rumors about the book, all the controversy surrounding it. We just want to encourage y'all. Like, look, if you can, read the book yourself.
Mhm.
Have a level head.
Mhm.
Don't be crazy and reactionary like we see on Twitter. And if you're not going to read the book, hopefully listen to us and see like a reasonable take on it
Mhm.
from people who don't necessarily agree with all of Stephen Wolf's theological traditions.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
I mean, I had a disagreement, and
Right.
it was just like, whoa.
At the end of the day, I can still walk arm in arm with Stephen Wolf and get this thing accomplished.
Yeah.
And we'll close with this. Is there anything you want to close with, Kendrick?
Nope.
Okay. There right now on Twitter. I saw Scott and you'll post something. Is that how you say his name? Annual.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going with that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he posted something about how these theological movements tend to die off because as people get older, they see that not a lot of ground has been covered and people just become bitter and angry. And that's why I think postmillennialism is central to this, because the whole point is thinking long term. You know what? I fully expect in my lifetime that I'll be put in a gulag or I'll be dead. And not by natural causes.
I call top bunk, but bottom bunk, by the way.
I honestly think if things get worse, they're going to hunt us down and try to kill us.
Mhm.
But the point is, like, look, even if that happens, think generationally.
Mhm.
Think about your children. Think about investing in your local churches and building that way.
Mhm.
Think long term. Think 1,000 years from now. We may gain just a slight bit of ground, and that's great. We don't need to see a whole, theological movement happen in our lifetime. So all I'm asking is, like, look, guys, be patient. We're just now rediscovering these truths and trying to implement them. It's going to take a long time. We may not see the full fruit of it in ours, but let's enable our children to carry on this torch.